Good morning and welcome to Sacred Ground Community Church and Sangha. We are a church and a Sangha. We offer a melding of Buddhism, Christianity, and earth-centered spirituality. We've been doing this since 2009, and we're glad you could be with us here this morning. If I'm a little disoriented this morning, I'll explain a little bit about that in a moment. But we're going to get started here first with just a moment of centering. We have the Tibetan singing bowl right here. And this bowl, I invite it to sound. And it is an invitation for each of us to be present, to be here in this moment. Adjust my camera here a little bit, try to. So I invite you to take a breath, breathing in and out. Deep and slow. Calm. Relax and enjoy the sound of the bell. In a way, to stop and enjoy the sound of the bell, it is mindfulness, but it is also an invitation into wonder, awe, mystery, and presence. I'll invite that bell to sound one more time. And Miss Ollie, if you could possibly come over and turn the furnace down on this side so we don't have that background noise, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Well, we're going to have a couple of readings today. One from Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Zen Buddhist monk from Vietnam. One of the leading voices of Buddhism in the West. Although he had a stroke a couple of years ago, his books and teachings are still readily available. We've had an opportunity to be on mindfulness retreats with him a few times in the past. And so I'm going to start today with a reading from his book, The Path of Emancipation, which is comes from talks from a 21-day retreat that he led. And I will be doing all of the readings in the meditation today. Usually, Ollie, my partner, does the meditations with me, or she does some of the readings, but she was in a car accident yesterday. She's fine, she's okay, but we decided she's there with us listening right now, but we decided that I would just do the readings today. So we'll start with this, and I'll tell you a couple of things. This comes from a section where he's talking about prostrations, where you may have seen like an image of the Dalai Lama, and people come and they prostrate themselves before him and this sort of thing. And One of the lovely things about Thich Nhat Hanh, they call him Thai, is that he invites us into new meanings of some of these old Buddhist traditions. He'll also talk about Bodhisattvas, again, drawing from the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is supposed to be a bodhisattva, someone who has returned to this life to add benefit, to bring healing and caring to others. But again, Thich Nhat Hanh offers us a kind of a greater view of what a bodhisattva can be, as you'll see in this reading. From the Path of Emancipation. We breathe in and out mindfully and look deeply into ourselves. We realize the nature of interbeing with all living beings around us. We become one with the living bodhisattvas around us. Their presence in the world is so refreshing and encouraging. When we watch them sitting, walking, and smiling, we see solidity, freshness, love, and understanding. We don't need to go to heaven to see bodhisattvas. They are here among us. They may exist in the form of a doctor, a social worker in South Africa, or an unknown Mother Teresa working in the third world. They are not abstract ideals. It is a great support to know that they are here among us. We breathe in and out, knowing that they are here and that we can receive their energy. If we ever get discouraged, we can practice mindful breathing and touch the presence of the bodhisattvas. They beautify our world, emanating loving kindness, mindfulness, solidity, and joy. We should vow to be one of them. It is a pity if we are not open to their energy. If we are embedded in sorrow or despair, we do not receive it. That is why we perform the second prostration. The second prostration is presented by a horizontal line, the here and the now. When we touch the earth in this position, we touch all living beings who are here with us in this moment. During the second prostration, we breathe mindfully, feeling the presence of the bodhisattvas and becoming one with them. We inter-are with them. The tree in the backyard is also a bodhisattva. She stands strong for the whole winter. Her capacity for enduring the coldness and harshness of life is huge. She sheds all her leaves to be strong enough to survive the winter. When spring comes, she manifests all her beauty. When you look at such a tree, you see a real bodhisattva. Her presence supports you. How many bodhisattvas can you identify around you? Human and non-human. Why are you pessimistic or overwhelmed by despair? We get tremendous energy from bodhisattvas if we allow them to enter us and be with us. With this power, we can touch other beings who are oppressed, who suffer from poverty and sickness, who are in some kind of hell, and who are unable to speak out about the injustices they have suffered. There is a lot of suffering in the human, animal, and vegetable worlds. Who is suffering? We are. Because we inter-are with everyone. We are the person who manufactures weapons to sell to underdeveloped countries. We are the child in Rwanda who is only skin and bones. We are the little girl who is raped on the ocean by a sea pirate. If we do not receive the power and strength of the Bodhisattvas, how can we bear this? How can we rescue these beings who are suffering deeply in the present moment? We identify ourselves with the great beings in the world and also with those who suffer terribly. We bend down, touch the earth, and stay there until we feel we have become one with it. Only when we become one with the earth and experience its power of embracing and healing can we do the work of transformation. I want to invite you into presence. Many of us are sitting in chairs. You might be sitting on the floor in a lotus or half lotus position. However you are sitting or standing, I invite you to realize that you're on a planet. I'll speak as if you're sitting in a chair, and you can adapt this if you're doing something different. I invite you to be aware of your feet on the floor. As you breathe in and out. In and out. Deep and slow. Deep and slow. I invite you to think about, of course we breathe with our lungs, but I invite you to think of your two legs as breathing in and out. Imagine that air going all the way down to the tips of your toes. Breathing in and out. Just as we know our lungs expand and contract, I invite you to imagine your thighs, your calves, even the heel of your foot, expanding and contracting with the in and out breath. Breathing in and out. In and out. I'm going to invite you to bring your attention up to your lower back, your full back, your torso and arms. And now, not just the lungs within your rib cage, but imagine that whole upper body as breathing in and out. In and out. Imagine your lower and mid back expanding and contracting, breathing in and out. Imagine your upper back and shoulders expanding and contracting, breathing in and out. Imagine your biceps, triceps, your forearms, and even the muscles in the digits of your fingers, breathing in and out. You might imagine that oxygen flowing down those arms to the tips of each finger and thumb. Breathing in and out. Breathing deep and slow. And now bring that attention to your shoulders, your neck, your jaw, your face, the crown of your head. Imagine it breathing in and out. You might imagine that out breath flowing out of the top of your head. Breathing in and out. You might feel the muscles in your face just loosening with this in and out breath as you just naturally breathe in and out. Deep and slow. Calm and ease. Smile and release. Don't force yourself, but allow your posture to be upright. Smile and release. Once more, bring that attention so that in-breath is going all the way to the tips of the toes, the tips of the fingers, the tips of the nose, the tip of the nose. Breathing in. Release. And release through the crown of the head. In. Release. In. Release. Our second reading today will come from the Hebrew Bible, from the book Deuteronomy, chapter 8. And one of the gifts that Sacred Ground Church gives to us, and, I'm in this role as Parson Michael, and I just enjoy this so much, is that we get to bring these great traditions into dialogue with each other. And I'll talk a little bit about that during my Dharma talk after the reading, but Thich Nhat Hanh says with any reading, Buddhist one, Christian one, Hindu, any tradition, try not to be in judgment of the reading, but just try and sit with it. Try and be like the earth on a rainy day where the water can just soak in, and may what's worthy be of benefit to you. And may what's not just wash away. Here's Deuteronomy chapter 8. And I'll invite the bell to sound to just invite you and me into mindfulness for this second reading. Enjoy the sound of the bell. Oh, I need my glasses. There they are. And for those of us who grew up in the Judeo-Christian tradition, I sometimes also like to just think, wow, my grandparents or great-grandparents may have heard these same words, a little different form, probably the King James version they would have heard, a long, long time ago. Deuteronomy chapter 8. This entire commandment that I command you today, you must diligently observe, so that you may live and increase, and go in and occupy the land that the Lord promised on oath to your ancestors. Remember the long way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness in order to humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commandments. He humbled you by letting you hunger, then by feeding you with manna, with which neither you nor your ancestors were acquainted, in order to make you understand that one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. The clothes on your back did not wear out, and your feet did not swell these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a parent disciplines a child, so the Lord your God disciplines you. Therefore, keep the commandments of the Lord your God, by walking in his ways and fearing him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with flowing streams, with springs, and underground waters welling up in valleys and hills. A land of wheat and barley, a land of olive trees and honey, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land where you may eat bread without scarcity, where you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and from whose hills you may mine copper. You shall eat your fill, and bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Take care that you do not forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments, his ordinances, and his statutes, which I am commanding you today. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then do not exalt yourself, forgetting the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness, an arid wasteland with poisonous snakes and scorpions. He made water flow for you from flint rock, and fed you in the wilderness with manna that your ancestors did not know, to humble you and to test you, and in the end, to do you good. Do not say to yourself, my power and the might of my own hand have gotten me this wealth. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, so that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your ancestors, as he is doing today. If you do forget the Lord your God and follow other gods to serve and worship them, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish. Like the nations that the Lord is destroying before you, so shall you perish, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. I'd like to begin this talk by reflecting a little bit on Thich Nhat Hanh's words. He speaks of Bodhisattvas, and in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, as I mentioned earlier, that term was, as I understand it, traditionally used for a pretty select group. Those who had come back, deciding not to go into nirvana, but had come back to this land to help others, being born again into this life so that they could be of service to others. And I gave the example of someone like the Dalai Lama. And Thich Nhat Hanh takes these ideas or ideals of Buddhism and he expands them. He makes them vast. You know, it's funny because a lot of people, they know Buddhism here in the West through someone like Thich Nhat Hanh. And they may not know that Thich Nhat Hanh's elders back in Vietnam, they were frustrated with this guy. This guy's taking such an expansive, open view, and no, you can't do this. And he did. And then that becomes, well, the New York Times said he's the second leading voice of Buddhism in the West, and the Dalai Lama being the first. And that becomes then the base from which Western Buddhism grows. And I just think that's delightful. And so part of what I want to do personally, and what I want to invite you to do, is to try to take that more expansive view, certainly of Buddhism, but of Christianity as well, and of the Judeo-Christian tradition as well. And he speaks of, in that first reading that I shared, he speaks of our interbeing natures, that we inter-are with each other. We live near the train tracks. You can probably hear the train in the background. That refers to commerce and the world that we live in. I'm not separate from that train track. And I sometimes refer to it as not just interdependence, but our fierce interdependence. And I was reading from another one of his books, Transformation at the Base, and I'm going to share a little bit with you from this in terms of a sense of that interbeing that we have with those trees that are bodhisattvas, but with all of the natural world. He's using, in this book, he's using the gardener as a metaphor, but just as a standalone, I find it lovely. So I'm not going to go much into the metaphor aspect of it, but just share what he wrote. This is from Transformation at the Base, and Thich Nhat Hanh writes, "A garden cannot cultivate itself. A gardener is needed. When the gardener has plowed, hoed, tilled, sown the seeds, and watered the earth offers flowers and fruits to support the life of the gardener. The gardener knows that it is not he or she that brings forth the fruits, but the earth itself. His or her job is simply to take care of the earth. After the gardener stops working, the soil continues to work in order to help the seeds sprout and grow. Sooner or later, quite naturally, there's a breakthrough. The flowers and fruits of awakening will arise from our consciousness. Or we could say the flowers and fruits of the earth will arise from the earth." We have blackberries and cherry trees and raspberries, and I just put some broccoli in the ground. Those will grow, and as the gardener, I have a role in that, right? But I can't do that by myself. It's me working in relation with the earth. It's so basic, right? But I was thinking of the tree in our backyard. We have a black walnut tree, and it's huge. We have a third story with a couple of attic spaces on our house. And the tree goes up above the black walnut. Now the thing is, I'm pretty sure some little human being, much smaller than that black walnut is today, I don't know how many years ago, way before we moved in here, planted that tree and cared for it, that seedling or sapling, and now it's huge. So when the Lord is speaking in Deuteronomy, he speaks of this land that these people who for 40 years, they've been wandering, just manna to eat. Moses doesn't even get to come into the new land. And then he tells them what you're going to find there. And he says, A good land, a land with flowing streams, with springs and underground waters welling up in valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat bread without scarcity, where you will lack nothing, a land where whose stones are iron and from whose hills you may mine copper. Flowing streams, springs, underground water, valleys, hills, wheat, barley, vines, figs, pomegranates, olive trees, honey, iron, copper. In these little segment, in this ancient text, so much is shared of the natural world that if we could live in relation to, we can serve it and it can serve us. But the story also goes, when you have all this land of milk and honey, you'll grow rich. And you might forget about, in this case, saying God, but we could say forget about the sacred. And I notice things in the text that I go, ugh! Like when I read, keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and by fearing him. And we hear this word fear. You think of, these God-fearing people. And when we think of fear, we think of terror. We think of being terrified. And this is one of the challenges with these old texts. And this is why, again, I invite you to try to just be the earth receiving the stories. Because this particular word that's translated as fear could also be translated as reverence. To live in wonder and awe. I think of Rudolf Otto, who spoke of the mysterium tremendum et fascinans, this tremendous and fascinating mystery that we're both drawn to and kind of wary of. Well, that's true of the earth itself too, right? I mean, this earth that can give us so much that I can go out and be amazed by the wonder of the bird song, this earth can also destroy me. And so, I guess I'm inviting myself, and in the process I'm inviting you into we have these words like the fear of God, and we repeat them and repeat them and repeat them, and we think, well, my gosh, I want nothing to do with that. And that's, to me, is understandable. But there's a number of different words in the old Hebrew text, and some of them do mean terror, but much more often, they're speaking of reverence and wonder. And even, I'll share this, at the end of this text, you might have said, this is okay, until Michael gets to the end of the reading. And it goes, if you do forget the Lord your God and follow other gods to serve and worship them, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish. Like the nations that the Lord is destroying before you, so shall you perish. because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. I spoke of that expansiveness that Thai has. And we can look at this and say, tribal religion, here are these folks, they're battling it out with the Moabites or the Hittites or the other groups. And it's just like, who has any use for that? And I think of the great sacred in a vast way. I'm thinking, whether one is Hindu or Buddhist or more of a theist or non-theist, I tend to think of it as all connected to the sacred. And, we could say, well, we don't worship, people don't really worship, they may not worship Yahweh or Jesus or whatever, but they sure don't worship any other gods, do they, right? I mean, we don't worship, Apollo and Poseidon and these old Roman gods. And this week then, I'm reading Robert Graves, and Robert Graves is a great one for humility, which I'll say just a couple of words about humility here in a second, but he wrote this book, The White Goddess, and it definitely humbles me because I try to read it, and within one page he's mentioning 20 philosophers and characters, and I don't know most of them, and so I don't make much progress with it, but I sometimes pick it up. And he wrote this in 1948, so over 70 years ago. And remember this, here's this story from Deuteronomy, a couple thousand years ago, more than that, in terms of not worshiping other gods. And let's listen to what Robert Graves said in 48. Though the West is still nominally Christian, we have come to be governed, in practice, by the unholy triumvirate of Pluto, god of wealth, Apollo, god of science, and Mercury, god of thieves. To make matters worse, dissension and jealousy rage openly between these three, with Mercury and Pluto blackguarding each other, while Apollo wields the atomic bomb as if it were a thunderbolt. For since the age of reason was heralded by his 18th century philosophers, he has seated himself on the vacant throne of Zeus, temporarily indisposed, as triumviral regent. We live in the University District. A lot of people around here with advanced degrees, etc. I wonder how many people I would have to stop and ask this question. Do you think we're worshiping any of the Roman gods anymore? Before one of them would say yes. I would actually adapt this a little bit. I think that Graves has it partly right, or maybe it was correct in 48, I don't know, when he says there's people are worshiping Pluto, the god of wealth, Apollo, the god of science, and Mercury, the god of thieves. I would add that it's probably more of a quartet these days, and maybe it was then, because I would add Mars, the god of war. And as I think of it, I would put in the high throne of Zeus, not Apollo, but the god of wealth, Pluto. Because that seems to be the one who's kind of dictating science and thievery and war. So my invitation with this is for each of us, if we wish, and I wish to do it, to read the sacred texts of the Judeo-Christian tradition with the same vastness that Thich Nhat Hanh is bringing to the Buddhist sutras and the Buddhist tradition. Thich says elsewhere, you are a bodhisattva in training. All around you are bodhisattvas. Those who in little ways or large ways are trying to add to the good. The tree in my backyard. What a lovely thing for me to go into my backyard today and say, oh my gosh, thank you. Because I do love that tree and it does add to the good in me. And during this time of pandemic, I spoke of our dog Cookie last week. Our two dogs, Coco and Cookie, holy cow, are they bodhisattvas? Are they adding to the good in me? How much laughter, how much joy? They start playing and wrestling with each other, and I get out of my head. I get out of my worries. I get into their joy. I get into their play. One last thing I'll say in terms of this chapter 8 of Deuteronomy. 3 times God speaks of being humble. And I looked it up. Humility or being humble is mentioned I think it's a total of 5 times in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. But it's mentioned 3 times in this chapter. I think I have that right. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's a few more. But just a few times, it's in like 300 pages in my Bible. Yet in this chapter, it talks about humility. And humility is such a tough one. Because I was thinking, to humiliate is horrible, right? I mean, and that is because you're putting yourself above someone else. But when we feel humiliated, well, that's awful. I don't disagree with that. And yet at the same time, we hold as some ideal this idea of humility. And then I think of humility as related to humor and to being human. And it's related to the humus, the rich soil. And I was reflecting on how much things have changed. The Lord is speaking of when you get wealthy. In 1957, we hit a point where they suspect that almost half of the American men were by that point using deodorant. In 1927, when my dad was born, nearly half of the homes in America had electricity. And just a few years after he was born, they started selling toilet paper in packs of rolls in stores. My grandmother spoke of breaking the ice in Slovakia to clean the clothes in the cold water of the stream. We have in these 100 years grown so wealthy. But I don't know if we feel wealthy. And we certainly seem to be kind of dismissive, oftentimes, of the sacred. Although we do have those new Roman gods. New to us, maybe. Or maybe they're old to us. Ollie and I go for walks and we ask each other questions, and she came up with a new question a few weeks ago, and she said, "What humbled you today?" Man, I like what inspired you, where did you experience joy, where did you see magic today? That humbled one, though, is a little tough, at least for me. But I think it's worthwhile, at least for me. I probably should have said this earlier, but I want to allow a few minutes here before we close if anyone has any joys and concerns. If you can wave your hand, I'll try to invite you in if you're on the Zoom call. If you're on the Facebook Live and you'd like to share, you can also try. And maybe Ollie, I know you don't have your camera on, but you could come over and let me know if there's anyone who wants to share. And I'll share a couple of joys and concerns to start. One is I want to give thanks that Ollie is okay. She needs to take it slow here, I think, for a couple of days. And we are very grateful that the car was totaled. We're grateful that no one else was in the car with her. It might have been pretty bad if somebody had been in the passenger seat, one of our kids or grandkids, or if I had been driving and Ollie had been there. We also ask for your prayers for Ollie's stepdad, who had a fall and has had hip surgery this week and is still going to have to probably have some further surgery. We saw friends who, a couple of young people who lost their brother a couple of months ago or so. And these are young people we've known since they were born. They lost their mom a few years back, and it was good to be with them and share some stories and time together. Also, a couple of folks who were active in Sacred Ground who've had COVID, and we know at least two people who were hospitalized, a husband and wife, and as far as we know, the woman is still in the hospital. And as we think of these specific people that are in our lives, I invite you to send that healing energy out to others who are suffering and going through difficult times. We'll open it up if anybody'd like to share any prayers, and we also invite you to share prayers in your heart. I lean into the belief that as we do that together, that we add healing and add benefit to the world. Okay. Ollie will share. Great.
Yeah, I'll just share just a bit. Just feeling inspired by the talk and the readings. Just going to say a prayer for the person who hit me. I don't know who he was. Actually, it was a hit and run, and he hit a number of other cars. after mine, but just prayers for him and thinking about what Michael was saying about fierce interdependence and how definitely his suffering in this world, he was on some sort of drugs or alcohol when this happened, but how his suffering definitely was overflowing, and it just obviously it affected me concretely and a number of people concretely, but just knowing that that's happening every day with people suffering, that maybe it doesn't hit us so concretely, but that we are all so interdependent and need to help care for each other's suffering. So, and just gratitudes that I'm safe and that and no one else was hurt in this, and hopefully he gets the help he needs.
Give it another minute if anybody else would like to share.
My name's Chris. Gail and I are in Texas. This is kind of a vague, open-ended prayer for the forces in our nation and in our world that are working toward healing the earth, healing the climate, healing racism, sexism. I mean, there's all these things. And a prayer that we can do it joyfully and mindfully and not keep unsubscribing to people who want to demonize the demonizers. And it's like, can we not become monsters when we fight the monsters? And I think Ali's compassion is a great example. But how to, so that's a prayer for healed and happy and present people to find each other and make a difference. We discovered last night, and then just a prayer for more kind of people like this and discoveries like this. Anyway, we discovered Stacey Abrams is a novelist. And she had this idea in law school of like writing a legal thriller, and found out they didn't want black women writers of legal thrillers, so she turned it into a romance too. And she's like on her 8th romance, thriller, whatever novel. So it's kind of a prayer for all of us to find this expansive creativity and talk about soulful and happy healing. She's definitely not strident, but she's moving forward in a way that taps her creativity and engages others. So prayers for many of us to be in that sort of joyful, peaceful warriors for the new earth.
I'll do the bell one more time. Just as someone may, with a car and with a lack of awareness and hit a number of other cars, perhaps cause a number of other people harm. May we also recognize that in our moments of compassion, kindness, playfulness, joy, agape love, that bumps into others as well, that it impacts them. And I don't know what level of awareness the young man who was driving had in terms of what he was doing, but sometimes even in our good acts, we're not aware of how things bounce off and bounce into and affect others. The gardener and the soil co-create. If the people go into the new land, they have to care for the pomegranates and the olive trees. They have to care for the soil. The black walnut tree in the backyard cares for us. We need healing for those who are in pain, those who are in fear, those who are suffering, those who have suffered horrific injustice. And we need prayers, we need healing for the whole web that we're a part of. For the whole community. We each have possibilities of adding hurt or healing. Maybe many sacred texts have those same possibilities. But help us to nurture and nourish and fertilize that which can add to the good in us, in each other. Help us to find ways to understand each other, to be compassionate where we failed to be compassionate, to be humble without having to be humiliated or humiliating, to just find the space for humility that recognizes that we're a part of this big, wonderful thing. And may we look at a tree today, or a dog, or a loved one, or a friend, or even one who's making big mistakes or little mistakes. And may we join with Thich Nhat Hanh and whisper to ourselves, there, right there, there's another Bodhisattva in training. There's another Bodhisattva in training. There's another Bodhisattva in training. And may we somehow all work toward what's beneficial, loving, compassionate, and worthy. Peace and amen. Oh, it looks like we have a couple of comments. We have Timothy saying thank you and have a great day, and Danny who says her thoughts and prayers are with Ollie and with all of us. Our simple aspiration is to water beneficial seeds in ourselves, each other, in this world, and we'll fail often, but may we often succeed, and may we not be discouraged. May we continue to just try our best to add to the good. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another Sunday service, and right before that we'll have our Monday Men's Mindfulness Group and our Wednesday Dharma Discussion Group Groundings that you're welcome to join us for. Peace to all of you.